So right now I have a slight problem, which is a good problem to have. I have a lot of fish. Not just that, but also these smaller pieces. Now, as anyone who actually catches and fillets fish will tell you, a lot of times when you're filleting fish, if you fillet it right and really get all the bloodlines out, a lot of times you'll have sort of scrap pieces like these over here that are a lot smaller, and you really can't give these individual attention. That said, it would be wasteful to not use these, especially as many as there are, and of course you want to eat these. And in this video I'm going to show you a way to use both of them in essentially a fish two ways recipe. This is a particularly good idea because a lot of times if you have a lot of fish, you don't really want to eat it a single way. Even if the way you're cooking it is absolutely delicious, eating a pound of delicious fried fish is not appetizing. You want some variety when you're eating. So first things first, I'm going to deal with these big, beautiful fillets. These are mutton snapper, if I remember correctly. And I'm just going to fry these like you would expect them to be fried. Simply with olive oil and salt and nothing more. By the way, this recipe only really uses shelf-stable ingredients, well, minus the fish. But to start, you're going to want to add in some olive oil, just enough to sort of coat the bottom of the pan. Keep in mind it'll spread out when it heats up, and you don't want to do too much. Now, this isn't the normal stove I work on at home. In fact, I am working with not the best materials all around. This olive oil is not extra virgin. It was like $4. This salt is actually not that bad. This pan is non-stick. You get it. As the oil is heating up, you're going to want to take the fish out, and you're going to want to pat them dry and salt them. You want to wait as long as you can to salt them, but they should be salted before going in the pan, on both sides. Alright, here we go. I'm going to pat these dry. By the way, these were frozen. I ate quite a lot of fish the first day we caught these, and then more the second day, and when you have so much fish, it's not a bad idea to freeze it. Fish like this snapper freezes well, and it's going to be just as good a few days later frozen as it was the day of. Maybe a little bit less delicious, but I am not keeping track. Now I'm going to salt these on both sides. Hard to do this with the camera. Camera's kind of shaky. So I'll salt them and then we'll move on to the sauteing. Alright, so the oil is pretty hot. You can see it's quite light. It's not as viscous as it was when we first put it in the pan. And I'm going to take the first fillet. Keep in mind this is still on high. This oil is very hot. And fillet away. Alright, now put cold fish in hot oil, in a hot pan, oil temp dropped. I'm going to wait for it to sort of creep back up, and then I'm going to turn the heat down to like 5 or 4. I want these to cook through. Alright, so far they are cooking nicely. As you can see, the oil is sort of creeping the heat up, and I'll flip these soon. As far as times go, it's really hard to say. This is quite forgiving to do fish this way, so provided you don't horribly overcook it, should still come out great whether you leave it for 4 minutes aside or 5 or 2, it really doesn't matter. In fact, I'm probably going to flip these more than once. Alright, so far so good. Looking nice, and color on these, caramelization is good. Obviously you don't want to overdo it, but it's added flavor. Because you're cooking the fish all the way through, you don't have to baby it and make sure it doesn't caramelize or anything like that. It's not rocket science, it's cooking. So, these seem to be done through. I've flipped them a couple of times, and they seem to be cooked. Now what I'm going to do is turn off the heat, place it off the burner, and just let it cool in the oil. In fact, I might even baste these fillets or flip them one more time as they're cooling. This is a whitefish, it's not an oily fish. It would benefit a lot from some fat and olive oil sort of coating it and getting into the fish as it cools. It'll only improve the flavor. Fat is flavor. Alright, so these have cooled down a bit, hopefully absorbed a little oil. Not too much, but just enough to make them a little more flavorful. Any excess sort of let drip off. They're going onto a serving plate anyway, so any excess won't be in the final product. But this is a good technique. It produces flavorful fish. It's cooked through. And if you do the thing I'm about to do with the used oil and the extra fillets, hold on, let me get this. It's hard to do while operating the camera. Then it's a fairly economical way too. I gave up trying to wrestle that fillet. I just tossed it over onto the plate. Alright. Now for part 2. There's a lot of flavor in this leftover oil, and I don't want it to just go to waste. This bottle may have been $4, but it would still be a waste. So next step is to take some of these cherry tomatoes and cut them in half. Now, I said before that we're only using shelf-stable ingredients in this recipe, and these have been sitting on a counter in this plastic tray for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. They're fine, they're shelf-stable. And I didn't even buy these. Someone else bought them, and I'm just using them. So the cherry tomatoes are now halved. Exact number doesn't really matter. I think this is 12. And oil is hot. I don't want it too hot, but I'll turn the flame back on, maybe to like 4. And take these and toss them in. Now these don't need to be in hot oil necessarily. They just have to saute a little bit. Basically until everything that's inside goes into the liquid portion and sort of sautés and the skins come off. Now what you can do to help this along is sort of take the spatula that you used and have been using for the fish and just sort of squeeze them down. This gets a lot easier once they start cooking, but if you can sort of squeeze them down in that hot oil, get everything more pressed, more surface area in contact with the pan, it'll make the process go a lot quicker. Alright, now while these are sauteing, I'm going to grab for some other ingredients. Garlic powder, just happen to have it on hand. Oregano, I just happen to have it on hand. This recipe really works with whatever you just have on hand. Dill would also be really good in this recipe, and fresh basil at the end would be delicious, but I don't have those. Not at the moment, at least. Okay, so the oregano goes in, just a shake or two. Not that much. You can really overpower it in this dish. And some garlic powder. Again, not all too much. This mixture's gone far enough. Now it's time to deglaze with some white wine. In my case, the white wine will be making the basis of the cooking liquid. If you want, you could dilute it with some water, or you could use something that isn't wine, maybe fruit juice, or cooking wine if you're not of legal age. This is one of the applications in which I'd say, you know what, doesn't really matter. Alternatively, you could also make a dish that was stock-based. That would also be delicious if you really didn't want to use the white wine. So that's boiling away. In fact, I'll turn it all the way up to high, because next step is to add the fish. Now, this fish is just going to get cooked till it flakes apart. That is good for a couple of reasons. One, when you're dealing with a lot of fish like this, it's a great way to make sure that all the pieces of fish get cooked, and you really don't have to give anyone individual attention. Not to mention the fact that this is a sauce dish, so having the fish flake apart will mean more of it's coated in the sauce, and it will be more delicious as a result. Alright, so I'm going to give the pan a swirl, see how much of that I can sort of immerse in the liquid, and what doesn't immerse, I'll just sort of pat down with the spatula. Get everyone sort of underneath the liquid so that they're all sort of cooking on all sides. If you had even more fish than I do, it might be a good idea to do it in batches, but in this case, it's fine. If you are concerned about the alcohol in the wine, because this dish is simmering for a decent amount of time, it should be cooked off by a reasonable amount. So the dish is almost finished, and what I'd suggest using right about now is some Tabasco. I've done this without Tabasco, and it's been great, so I would err on using somewhere between none at all and too much. That's right about enough. Alright, so the fish is pretty much broken up at this point. You'll notice actually when the fish breaks up, the more it breaks up, the less sauce there is. It sort of thickens up. And this is ready to go. Just need to check for seasoning, adjust salt, maybe some pepper, although I actually don't have pepper on me right now. So, do salt. Trust me, it's delicious. Alright, so I ended up needing to adjust with quite a bit of salt, but after that it is absolutely delicious. Alright, now to deplate, just going to want to overturn the pan. Sometimes I've been able to do it with a plate. I haven't had like too much. I've just been able to do it on a plate. That looks cooler because you sort of drape it over. But there it is. Most of it is out of the pan. And I didn't have to dirty another spoon. So there we have it. Fish two ways. Well, that's about it. Hope you all enjoyed. See you next time.